I mean, at the moment, I could do this as a tier list, you know, of just the monsters that I enjoy going up against. I think that would probably be the best way of putting it. I probably would take into consideration as well their afflicted form as well. So, Tetranodon at the moment, to be honest, in terms of how funny he is to fight, he's around an A or B tier for me. I think the whole thing with him getting his belly enlarged by taking in the water is a novel concept, and you can power it's like his powered up mode, and you can power him down by smacking him in his tummy and making him vomit up the water and powering him down that way. But I think when it comes to the afflicted version of him, Tetranodon isn't as fun to fight because he can go into these loops where he can, you know, he constantly performs these sumo charges at you, which is a little bit of a downer. It's a little bit of a it's annoying, put it that way. So I'm going to put him in a B tier. Apex Rathalos. Apex Rathalos wasn't the worst, but he was an Apex, and Apex monsters were not always the most fun to fight. They were definitely overpowered and big health sponges. For me, in terms of how enjoyable he was to fight, he was probably a B tier again. I did prefer Tetranodon to Apex Rathalos, if I'm honest. Malzeno for me, in terms of how funny he is to fight, is probably one of the best monsters in how enjoyable he is to take on in Sunbreak at the moment. The monster has a clear kind of structure and format to his fight, in that, you know, he builds up that the Creos around him to the point where he powers up, and you can power him down by targeting specific monster body parts. His moves are nice and telegraphed, but still dangerous and can still catch you unaware. But his arsenal of moves are they're quite easy to learn and to bait out in a way. So you can kind of, you know, you can fight the monster by positioning in some respects. You know, getting yourself into the right position. I mean, I know you can do that with all monsters, but with Malzeno, it just feels good. It feels good. When compared to Magnamalo, for me, Magnamalo is about an A tier. He is a little bit more enjoyable than Tetranodon and Apex Rathalos. Magnamalo, especially the afflicted version of him, isn't so hot, because when he does go on his, well, Zoomies mode, when he's powered up, it is hard to pin him down. And I know you can. I mean, one of the things that does make the Malzeno fight enjoyable is when he has clear hit me here points, shall we say. You know, when his arms, his face, his back, his tail, when they're on fire, it's the game's clear indication of saying, you know, hit monster here to power it down, which is fine. But he is a bit of a brute, and he can kind of power his way through you, which keeps him off the top spot for me a little bit. The actual Hellfire mechanic is nice, but I don't think it was utilized as well as it could have been. I do like that you can kind of knock him over maybe a few times using his Hellfire by performing the Wirebug dash to get it off of yourself, but I don't think it's as well utilized as it could be, or when compared to sort of like how Malzeno's mechanics work. But I mean, they're completely two different completely monsters. I just compare them because they're both flagships. Chameleos is weird. Low rank Chameleos was kind of dull but fine to fight. Master rank Chameleos, though, is a different kettle of fish. I don't mind fighting him at all, but he does have a lot more unpredictability, shall we say, when in his master rank form. Obviously, the main takeaway when it comes to Chameleos is, you know, make sure you got your antidotes. Apart from that, most of its moves are easily telegraphed and easily counterable. Even with that unpredictable nature of that it has sometimes, you can still generally most of the time think I've just contradicted myself by saying he's unpredictable, but then also saying that his moves are easily telegraphed. But anyway, regardless, it is late. I'm doing this as a spur of the moment thing, just rambling my thoughts off. Chameleos, I don't mind fighting him. He's A tier for me. Like I said, just make sure you got your antidotes and avoid his poison nonsense. I suppose the only aspect of him that does annoy me a little bit is sometimes he can be a little bit difficult to keep track of when he's gone invisible. But then again, that's the whole point in the monster. And there are ways to counter that with the camera. And just be aware of your, keeping your situational awareness high and keeping an eye on your environment can help. Bisarios. Can't stand fighting this monster. Bisarios is a pain in the butt. I tend to only fight it with weapons such as the Darcblade gun lance or sticky ammo bowguns, because its hide is so hard that it feels very unsatisfying bouncing off of its hard hide all the time. I know you can, when it is powered up and it's got its sort of like volcanic kind of flame on mode, that it does soften its hide so your attacks can go through, but even then it's very unsatisfying bouncing off its attacks, or bouncing off its hide with your attacks all the time, as well as when it starts to bowl over, do this sort of like slow charge, nothing can stop it and it just runs into you. The afflicted version is even worse. And when it comes to Wyvern riding the monster as well, its moves are so slow that sometimes you end up failing the Wyvern ride, which for me puts him in the D tier. Rathalos, normal Rathalos, I find is a lot of fun. I am torn between these. I think I'm going to put him S tier. He's a lot of fun to fight, but he does stay airborne a lot longer. But again, his moves are telegraphed, and you can normally tell when he's landing, and obviously time your attacks properly that way. I think the only reason maybe that stops him from staying off the top spot is the afflicted version of Rathalos. The afflicted version of Rathalos, because he stays airborne so long at certain times and points, that the Krios are able to build up on him, and he's unable to unleash that Nova attack because you're not able to power him down as much, because while he is in the air, you're kind of waiting for him to come down unless you've got a ranged or airborne weapon, which is probably the main reason that keeps him off the top spot for me personally. But other than that, he's actually for me, he's quite a lot of fun to fight. Baroth is fine. In my opinion, he's fine. I know whacking him in the head can be a little bit annoying, but he's fine. Just attack his little T-Rex arms. I've never had a problem with Baroth. I think some people out there have, but his charge is normally you can normally easily avoid his charge. He telegraphs it not only with his body posture, but a freaking train sort of like whistle. The mud factor the isn't really that big of an issue in Rise and Sunbreak, I found. So yeah, I've got no real qualms or issues with Baroth. It's just fine. It's just fine. But I think the reason it keeps him off the higher things is because his move set is a little bit simple when compared to monsters I would put in the high tiers. Now, Magma Almudron is a tricky one. Personally, I know a lot of people do like him, and I think his design is a little bit better than some of the ones I've put higher, but I'm going to put him in B tier. High B tier. I prefer him to these two, to Pteranodon and Apex Rathalos. Magma Almudron, I don't like that. He's a weird monster. I admire his design, like I said, but I find fighting him sometimes more frustrating than it's worth, especially the afflicted version of Magma Almudron, simply because I don't like it when he's going underground so much. His slow-moving magma pools can be unpredictable in the direction to which they're going to flow and move. So sometimes, it does. I mean, okay, you can jump over them with the wire bugs, but you don't always have your wire bugs available. He hits hard, but then again, he is a higher tier monster, so that's kind of fair enough. But I don't know, his moves and patterns, the dance with the monster doesn't feel as satisfying when compared to some of the other monsters out there for me personally. But that being said, he's not the worst, and I do like that he has better hit zones than his cousin, the normal Almudron. I do like that when you can tell when his legs are powered up, because they're sort of like glowing bright red. I just wish he would stay above ground so you can actually attack these points a little bit more. I think that's one of the main issues when it comes to the afflicted version of Magma Almudron, is when he is powered up, say his legs or there's either forelegs or hind legs are powered up. Sometimes it's, or even his tail. No, his tail's always out. But when he's underground, or when he's submerged, shall we say, you can't go for those points that have Krios cores on them. So there's a chance there's a chance he performs that Nova simply because you couldn't access the body points that had the cores on them. So that's why he's on a little bit lower for me there. Now, the Archdemon, the final boss of the main story of Sunbreak. No, he doesn't go there. For me, he is about there. I don't mind fighting the Archdemon. I farmed him a lot and learned his patterns, and he is learnable. You can teach yourself the fight and take it on quite comfortably. It took me a little while, but once it was down, I started. Apart from the last phase where he starts stomping around the entire map, I didn't find him too difficult. That last phase, like I said, when he is stomping about and casting all these sort of like Krios fireballs, for lack of a better word, it gets a little bit frustrating then. But for me, it wasn't wasn't the worst. He has decent hit zones, so it wasn't the worst, but by no means the best. Gos Harag, I love Gos Harag, the Yeti. I really do enjoy Gos Harag. I hope we get a variant or subspecies of him soon. I think he's a good addition to the Monster Hunter monster roster. For a fanged beast, he is probably one of my favorites. I like that he has the whole mechanic where he'll ice up his arms and turn them into swords, but in return, whilst his damage does go up thanks to having that, his moves are still generally, you got an idea of what moves he's performing. They're easily telegraphed, but while they're more deadly and they hit a lot harder, they are also very weak to fire and such. They turn into massive weak points for the monster. So I like that trade-off. That trade-off is something I really approve of. But apart from that, no, I quite like Gos Harag. I think he's a great addition. Really, I do go up against him quite a bit, so I do enjoy the fight. Daimyo Hermitor. They're one of the low-tier monsters added with Sunbreak. For me, to be honest, he's fine. I don't find him too difficult. Not too annoying. He's just I don't have a lot to say about him. I think he's cute. I mean, how he's dancing on my screen every stream, so I can't I do have a soft spot for him. I find him kind of derpy and cute in terms of design. I do like that factor where he kind of shields his eyes and then he pokes his eyes out after a little while. And if you don't attack while he's doing that, and only attack when he pokes pokes his eyes out from behind his shield, then you get that added sort of like stun effect to it. To your attacks. So, I kind of like that sort of aspect of him. But apart from that, he's fine. He's easily controllable. His legs are quite weak, so you can topple him over quite a bit. He's quite susceptible to being stunned. So, Yeah, I got no issues with Daimyo Hermitaur, and he's about an A tier for me. He's not higher because he doesn't have any sort of like super strong mechanics that make him interesting or make him stand above the rest, though. Great Baggy. Great Baggy is fine if he's a bit of a punching bag. And don't get me wrong, punching bags are nice to go up against sometimes, but they are... You know what, I'm judging this on how fun they are to fight, and I'm thinking to myself, is Great Baggy more fun to fight than these in B tier? And to me, yes, he is. He's easier, he's more enjoyable, you see big numbers against him, even against the afflicted version of him. He is a great way to test builds, to test weapons, to you know, and for me, he is more enjoyable to go up against than these guys in B tier. The only reason I'm struggling to place him, in all honesty, is he is easy. He's super easy to take on. He rarely will cart you, even in the afflicted version, unless you're going up against the afflicted version and you're low level yourself, or you have low rank armor or something. So you know, A tier, I guess, for me. I think that's where I put him. Lagambi, I don't like fighting Lagambi. I would take him on I'd place him above Basarias in terms of how fun he is to take on, but Lagambi is a frustrating fanged beast. He, to be honest, a lot of the fanged beasts I have a little bit of an issue with. They, especially their afflicted versions, they are small monsters that you expect to be punching bags, like the smaller bird wyverns, like Great Baggy and stuff, but and they're rated so low. You know, they're tier 1 monsters, you know, 1-star afflicted monsters. They're rated so low, but yet they can power through pretty much all your big combos, and it's a very, almost like you have to do a take your turn style play style when it comes to fighting the fanged beast, and it's definitely with Lagambi that is the case. The aspect of, you know, his snow fireballs are also a pain. They're not the worst. I mean, out of the fanged beast, he's not my least favorite, but I don't enjoy going up against Lagambi. He's I feel very unsatisfied with the hunts against it. So that's why he's so low down for me. Garnagom. I actually really do like fighting Garnagom. Garnagom out of the new Sunbreak monsters is a good addition, in my opinion. I know some people have a little bit of an issue with him performing his kind of double fist pound attack over and over again, but sometimes that could be due to positioning and such. But for the most part, I do enjoy fighting the monster. I like the mechanic behind its arms being powered up, and much like Gos Harag in some sense, when its arms become powered up, they become even weaker as hit zones as well. So it's a trade-off, that risk-reward trade-off. He was the first afflicted monster that caused me a little bit of difficulty, shall we say. So he does stand out a little bit, but now that forced me to learn his patterns, and I think with Garnagom, positioning is one of the positioning and trying to bait out certain attacks is key to taking him down and enjoying the fight more. It took me a little while to realize that, but once I did, he's been I really don't mind going up against him. I find him quite fun. Brings us on to Espinas. Espinas is probably Espinas is about there for me, about high A tier. Obviously getting caught by his fireball is a pain in the butt. His fireball with poison, fire and paralysis all in one is novel, but if you do get hit by it, it is painful. But his moves are quite slow, they're quite telegraphed again, so you can easily or you can learn how to best counter them. And well, like I said, most of the time Monster Hunter hunts, I see them as dances with you and the monster. And if it flows nicely, then that is what makes the hunt more enjoyable for me. And it flows okay with Espinas. I think the main issue that I have with the monster is when it starts doing its sort of like Diablos style charges over and over again, because whilst it is good getting out, you know, it is enjoyable trying to avoid these attacks and get out of the way and dodge them. If you're trying to deal as much damage as you can, whether you're testing a build to see what its damage capabilities are, or if you're going against the afflicted monsters, afflicted Espinas, and you have that DPS check you need to meet by breaking those anomaly cores, when it commits to these charge attacks over and over again, it's impossible, and you're going to get hit by that Nova. Well, not necessarily hit by it, you know, yourself, but you know the hunt's going to result in a Nova. Anyway, right, Violet Mitsune. Violet Mitsune is, I think, a beautiful monster, but in terms of how fun he is to fight, he goes there for me, unfortunately. I know some people may disagree with me, but the main reason for my dislike of Violet Mitsune is not its home in fireballs, not the whole fire mechanic. There's two reasons. One, when I'm playing melee against it, it's always moving away from me, and it feels like I'm playing freaking chase with the monster. And when I'm playing ranged against the monster, its hit zones are awful. I believe most of the time its tail is the only super satisfying point to hit, and most of the time when you're playing ranged, it's not, you're not at its back anyway, especially if you're playing hunt solo, which is where I do majority of my hunting. So both those factors really dampen the hunt for me, and drops the monster quite low. But I do think it is one of the most, I mean, if we were talking designs and how pretty monsters look and how their aesthetics, it'd be a lot higher. But in terms of how enjoyable the hunt is, which is what this tier list is, he's unfortunately mid B tier. Okay, let's get on to Zenoga. Zenoga in Rise is fine. For me personally, I'd probably put him low S. Zenoga is quite enjoyable to fight. I don't have any issues with him. It is pretty much the same standard Zenoga we've had in previous Monster Hunter games, and even in the previous Monster Hunter games, Zenoga has always been enjoyable for me. He has the simple, he has the power up mechanic where vocal bugs build up on him, eventually unleashing his kind of Super Saiyan mode, which of course you can power down by attacking the glowing points on him, and it just flows nicely. The hunt feels like a dance to me. His moves have been they're still quite telegraphed. I know there are some points when fighting Zenoga where he does become a little bit like he's got the zoomies and can be hard to pin down, but it's not as bad as some other monsters out there in my personal opinion, and you can bait out certain attacks to allow you to aid in powering him down, ultimately for me making him low S tier. Anyway, going on to the next monster, which is that Lucent Nagakuga? I can't tell by the... No, that is just normal Nagakuga. Lucent's bright white. Anyway, Nagakuga is another monster I enjoy. I do enjoy fighting old Nagakuga quite a lot. Its moves could be considered quite simple. But then again, he is an older monster, much like Zenoga, that we've learned his moves over the course of many Monster Hunter games, that they become almost second nature when fighting the monsters. Obviously, the afflicted version of Nagakuga is a little bit more difficult, but even then, it feels... the dance, the hunt, feels good, at least for me, when it comes to fighting Nagakuga. I know he has lost some aspects found in other games like bleed. He doesn't cause bleed anymore, but that's not a bad thing. Bleed is a little bit of an annoying mechanic, so I'm not missing that. He can be a little bit feisty especially the afflicted version, and you have to realize that some of his attacks, they will chain into one another, and he'll perform sort of like 3 sort of like combos in one before actually stopping and allowing you to attack him, which could be annoying when fighting the afflicted when anomaly cores are building up. But for the most part, no, I think he's fine. Low S. Brings me on to Tigrex, which again, for me, an S tier. Tigrex, I quite like fighting. Yes, he is a little bit of a charge maniac at times, but for the most part, thanks to the moves he has available to him, as well as the hit zones he has on his head and forearms or forewings, the fight against him is... I've never really had too much of an issue. I've always kind of enjoyed going up against him. But again, much like Zinogre and Nagakuga, we've had many games to learn his moves and tactics. And although each monster gets new moves when it comes to master ranks and other versions of the games, most of the time, once you've kind of adapted yourself to monsters in previous games, they kind of... They overlap a little bit in other games, and that is definitely for me the case with Tigrex, and I still enjoy the hunt, so he's going in the S tier for me. Brings us on to Silver Rathalos. Silver Rathalos is unfortunately for me high B tier. I don't enjoy him as much as normal Rathalos, but then again he is harder, but the main reason that makes it less enjoyable for me is because again, he stays airborne for too long, which is fine if you main a ranged weapon, or maybe the insect glaive that can deal with the airborne monsters a little bit more easily. But for the most part, Silver Rathalos isn't as enjoyable. I don't think he's as difficult as his Iceborne and World version, but he was not... It's still not always fun going up against him. Not the worst, but by no means not the best. And yeah, he does have similar moves to the other Rathalos monsters in Sunbreak. But that I think that airborne factor puts a huge dampener on the monster for me personally. And eventually we're probably going to get an afflicted version of it eventually, which will make it even worse. But oh well. Anyway, Almudron. Ooh, this is a tough one because Almudron isn't the worst, but I think he's worse than his cousin Magma Almudron. And the main reason is very similar reasons. I would say maybe... Actually, I'm going to put him in high C, because the main thing that sets him apart from Magma Almudron is hit zones at the end of the day. Magma Almudron has more favourable hit zones, whilst normal Almudron has kind of crappy hit zones. He's not like I said, he's not the worst. He's fine to go up against. I don't mind going up against Almudron. I've fought him quite a lot when compared to some of the other monsters in the roster. But there is... no, actually, I mean, like when he gets that massive mud ball on his tail, I find he becomes a little bit more enjoyable because he tends to stay above ground a little bit. Let's put him low B actually. So there are some times where he does become enjoyable, but like I said, when he is submerged or half submerged, it's annoying to get at anomaly cores if he's afflicted. It's hard to attack certain points. His hit zones aren't exactly the best, especially when it comes to gunners, if I remember correctly. And overall, it's not the best experience, the best dance, the best hunt. Not the worst, but not the best. Shogun Senator. Now, this is a monster that at first, when I first fought it, it was going to be around sort of like B, C, D tier. But the more I've taken it on, the more I've started to enjoy the hunt and how the monster works. I'm going to put him at high A. I do like going up against Shogun Senator, but I don't like the bleed mechanic I feel when going up against the monster. it feels like almost all of its attacks bleed. I know they don't, but it feels that way. I know you can counter this, and I feel that you have to always counter this by picking up the endemic life Cobra that nullifies you to bleed and such. But and when you do that, it kind of makes the monster a lot more easy. I think the downtime of having to go away and heal the bleed by crouching or taking the jerky or whatever is just it feels like busy work. But other than that, Shogun Senator has been it took a little while to learn its moves, especially because I think a lot of people haven't experienced the sort of like the crab kind of monsters before. Same with Daimyo Hermitor in some respects. Whilst World wasn't my first one, the crabs haven't been a monster I've farmed a lot or experienced a lot of. So, I think some of us may have been in that sort of like similar boat where we are not used to that sort of like the aggressive crabs, the aggressive crustaceans. So, but once you take the time to learn the monster, he's been quite fun to fight. Yeah, I like fighting him with pretty much every weapon as well. And when you crack open his shell, let's just say there may be a flipping sensor bar on its back, blur it out. Anyway, let's move on to the next monster, Apex Enoga. Apex Enoga, I didn't really like that much. I'm going to put him high C tier. Apex Enoga, I found, unlike normal Enoga, I didn't like Apex Enoga because it felt like you got little to no time to have your say in the hunt. that when a hunt occurs, there'll be times where you take the lead, where the hunter takes the lead rather than the monster, so to speak. And with Apex Enoga, it felt like you had very few windows of opportunity to attack or perform any sort of meaningful moves or satisfying attacks, more importantly, as this is a tier list about enjoying hunts. And so with that lack of being able to have your turn or perform those satisfying attacks with your weapons, it just brought the hunt down for me. And that's why Apex Enoga is so low on the list. I know in some respects, when it comes to the Apex monsters, they all are very similar. The Apex monsters, for the most part, I believe the original plan was for them to only be a part of the rampages. And with the rampages, obviously, you have more ways to control a monster. You have all the artillery to help you out. So, that could be a factor in why the Apex monsters are the way they are. Now, Rajang is a funny monster in Sunbreak and Rise. Rajang, a lot of people, he is not nearly as threatening as he was in Iceborne. To the point where his moves are they're really easily telegraphed that he's not nearly as big a threat as he once was, which makes him a lot easier, but makes him a little bit more dull. I think I'm putting him there. He is fun to fight. He is fun to dance with. He still has his Super Saiyan factors, but most of the time you can easily counter him. I think the negatives are that maybe he's got a little bit duller than he used to be. He is a small monster as well still, so sort of like some aspects like piercing ammo and such don't work so well against him because obviously his small hit zones. But I don't have too much to say about Rajang. It's strange because back in Iceborne days when he was difficult, he was more threatening and I had a little bit more respect for him. But at the same time, the hunt might not been as in. I don't know. It's hard to describe how I feel about Rajang and where he is in this tier list. So he's going in the middle of the pack really. He's fine, but he's not nearly as threatening as he was, which is good for some players, I guess. But you don't get that sort of like awe from him anymore. Which, well, it is what it is. Anyway, Puke. I got a little soft spot for Puke. He's fine. To me, he's a bit like a Baroth in terms of his moves are easily avoidable, easily telegraphed. But I still have fun fighting him, although I do feel guilty for fighting him, and so I tend to always capture Puke if I can. Hit zones are great, they're all quite susceptible to your moves and attacks, and he is another good monster to test out builds against, in my opinion, as long as you're not using poison. So for me, he's an A tier. Volvidon, low C. Volvidon I don't like going up against. Again, he is a fanged beast. So he has the similar problems to Lagambi in that, actually I prefer him to Lagambi if I'm honest. Prefer fighting him to Lagambi. In that he, for such a low tier monster, he seems to power through your attacks most of the time, your long combos, your satisfying moves. So it feels very unsatisfying to fight. On top of that, he has the nasty paralysis that he can cause, which once you've sort of learned his moves, the paralysis doesn't catch you unaware as much. And he also has the farting mechanic where it stops you for healing from a little bit. But again, both of those moves are kind of telegraphed, so they are easier to avoid than, say, Lagambi's massive snowballs at times. So I that's why I'm putting him above Lagambi here. So, but ultimately, Volvidon, I'm not a big fan of the monster. I do appreciate them bringing back the Fanged Beasts, in all honesty, but in regards to taking them on, I'm not a big fan of them, especially their afflicted forms. I must confess, I suppose with these Fanged Beasts and Azuros when we get to him, my main gripe is with their afflicted forms rather than their normal forms, but their normal forms would, I don't know. I'm just sticking them there for now. Kushala I think is in a good place in Sunbreak. Kushala is a lot more enjoyable to fight than he was in previous games, but where I think Kushala was be there for me. He still has the wind mechanic, which can be a little bit annoying, but he is not nearly as unsatisfying to fight when compared to previous games. He doesn't stay in the air as long, which is probably the main factor to the fight being so much more enjoyable. His moves are easily telegraphed. Well, they're not easily telegraphed, but you can tell what's coming with his moves and react to them in good time, which makes the hunt overall enjoyable, and it makes the fight satisfying for me. So that's why it's in the S tier for me. Nawa is, I really can't, I don't like fighting Nawa. And in some respects this goes for the All-Mother as well. Is that actually put down as a separate one? Yeah. I mean, I put these two together at the same time, to be honest. I really don't enjoy fighting Nawa or the All-Mother. It could be many factors. The size of the monster. Sometimes it could be hard to track. I dislike that a lot of its moves have a huge area of effect, and just one misstep can result in a cart, especially when using certain weapons. Bow. So yeah, I don't enjoy the fight. It feels very floaty. Get it? Because she has a giant. Anyway. So yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, I don't enjoy the Nawa or the All-Mother fight, and I try to do them as little as possible. I don't like its moveset. I feel there is very little room to get out of the way of some of its moves. One wrong move and you're out. I hate the its kind of Nova in its ultimate, where it will cause the Dragonators to come up from the ground and spin around it. It feels a little bit like luck if you survive that. You obviously can do things to get out of it. I mean, most of the time I just far cast out there, wait till she's done. So ultimately, at the end of the day, she's not enjoyable, and I'd rather not fight Nawa or the All-Mother when it comes up. Apex Diablos. Apex Diablos is a little bit like the other Apexes. Big bullet sponges, hits very hard, overpowered kind of damage numbers. But Apex Diablos wasn't the worst out of the bunch for me. It definitely had some flashy moves for a Diablos, I will give it that, which were quite spectacular to witness. But in terms of taking on, it felt a little bit unfair at times if you were to get hit by it, of course. But he wasn't the worst, but by no means the best, so he's going in the middle of the pack for me. Scorned Magnum Marlowe. Scorned Magnum Marlowe, I think, is Scorned Magnum Marlowe, I think, is a little bit more enjoyable to fight than normal Magnum Marlowe. That being said, it's more deadly. It has more harder hitting moves. But I think the fight is more satisfying. I think it does have more techniques and moves in its repertoire when compared to normal Magnum Marlowe. The change between the two, I don't know, it feels less sort of brutish in that it bowls. It's almost like the Scorned Magnum Marlowe will rely on its hellfire a little bit more than just running into you, like the normal Magnum Marlowe does. And I kind of appreciate that in some respects, because I find it is easier to anticipate that and kind of work your way around that, and thus allow you time or to predict and to perform your own more satisfying moves with your weapon when compared to normal Magnum Marlowe. This is just my experience from it. It may be not true. They may, brute force their way exactly the same, but that's what it feels like to me, and that's why for me Scorned Magnum Marlowe is slightly above the normal Magnum Marlowe. We'll see if this stays the same when Afflicted Scorned Magnum Marlowe eventually comes out, but we'll see. Bishaten, I'm not a big fan of. This is orange, blood orange Bishaten. Sorry, still not a fan of. Especially when it comes to wyvern riding. One of the worst wyvern riding monsters out there, especially the normal Bishaten. But anyway, blood orange. I don't have a lot of good things to say about it. I think I have more negatives than positives. I feel most of the time that your hits against it don't feel that impactful, especially when you look at the monster and see how sort of, I don't want to say flimsy, but it looks, and the way it moves, you would expect it to be a little bit more light, and thus when you would whack it with your greatsword or something, that the impact would be felt by the monster a little bit more. But then again, you could say that a lot about some of the monsters in the game. But regardless, still, Blood Orange Bishaten also has a lot of annoying AoE attacks with its explosive pine cones, which, you can anticipate, but it is hard to work around and follow up with your own combos and abilities sometimes. Sometimes it's just a case of getting out of the way and then waiting for its next attack before you get to use your attack, instead of getting out of the way, attacking, rinse and repeat kind of mentality. Anyway, lower in the tier list for me, Blood Orange Bishaten is. Okay, next up is Aurora Somnicanth. I think this monster shares similar issues to the Bishaten monsters, if I'm honest. Although the Aurora Somnicanth isn't as annoying as the normal one. I would rather fight it than... I think I would go high B. It is, again, a flimsy looking monster. Thin, skinny, and you would expect your attacks to cause some nasty impacts on it, but it does shrug it off quite a bit. But Aurora Somnicanth isn't as annoying to fight as its cousin, the normal Somnicanth, because it obviously specialises in ice, and I find going up against an ice monster a little bit more satisfying than a sleep monster. Plus, you can counter-attack it. Normally, when a monster specializes in a certain element, it's very susceptible to the opposite element. So going against Aurora, so I'm going to count with a fire build is quite satisfying. The hit zones you get some nice damage numbers out of it. So that makes the fight a little bit more enjoyable for me. Yeah, just watch out for its ice AoE. I think other than that, the monster's not the worst, but not the most satisfying, if you get what I mean. Rathalos. Oh Rathalos. Now, how do I judge this? Because Rathalos, to me, is my training dummy. And I find her so satisfying to fight. Her moves are so easy to avoid. They're sort of like, they've kind of been imprinted on my mind that I know almost everything she does before she does it. She is the monster that I use to test pretty much every build or theory of a build before going on to harder, more challenging tests. Which is, I suppose, the main negative, and maybe what should reduce her down a tier, which is that she is so predictable that, yeah, I'll drop her down a tier. Because even she is predictable, and if I want a challenging hunt, Rathian isn't going to be it. Rathian is, even the afflicted Rathian isn't a challenge. But she is a great way to test things, skills, builds, weapons. She is probably the best training dummy in the game. So yeah, in terms of challenge, she's very low, but I do still find it satisfying to fight her. Astalos, I think is great. I'm glad that they put Astalos in the game. I find him very satisfying to fight. I think the demo definitely helped. Obviously, as well, I also had experience of Astalos in Generations, being my first monster hunter. And Astalos's moves, he has a power-up mechanic again, where he starts getting charged up by lightning. And I will say a lot of these S tier monsters have a power-up mechanic that grows as the fight goes on, and as a result, they reveal weaker spots for a hunter to target. That's definitely the case with Astalos as well. When it gets more powered up, obviously, the areas that are charged become weaker and more susceptible to your attacks. So it's like that trade-off, and I do enjoy that in my hunts. And that's what makes Astalos so high for me in the tier list. Yes, he can still smack you quite hard, especially if you get caught out with his tail attacks. You have to deal with paralysis sometimes, but that's not the worst. And can be countered because the tail attacks are generally quite slow. They have slow wind up, so you can normally easily avoid them unless you're getting greedy and overcommitting with your own attacks. The main danger, I think, with Astalos comes from its wing attacks when it slams and when it gets aggressive in that manner. But no, I still find it very enjoyable. The demo definitely helped as well when it came to learning Astalos moveset for Sunbreak. So for me, he goes up into the S tier. Right, we'll stick the two bears because they're pretty much the same down at the bottom, because I can't stand fighting Azuros, especially the afflicted form of it. Azuros is, for me, the worst experience to fight, which is strange because it's like one of the first monsters you go up against. But it just when it gets enraged, it just bowls you over, and it feels like you can't do anything to stop it unless you want to utilize traps and such. And the same goes for the Apex version as well, which is why I'm putting both of these down here together. It feels so unsatisfying to fight these. You rarely get time to pull off your long combos unless you have used some form of crowd control, and I don't always like to use traps and other forms of crowd control in my hunts. Sometimes I just want to, well, like I've banged on about a few times now, dance with the monster, and it feels like Azuros doesn't want any of that. So, Azuros, buddy, you're going in the D tier list, unfortunately. I will say that the very first Azuros, the normal Azuros, is slightly more bearable. But like I mentioned about Lagambi and Volvidon, we're mainly looking at afflictive for these boys anyway. Seregios. I'm sorry, I don't like fighting Seregios. A cool concept, but like I said with Shogun Senator, I don't like the bleed mechanic. With Seregios, I hate that the camera has trouble tracking him, and most of the times I feel like I'm getting hit unfairly, if that makes sense. Like, I know there are ways to track monsters when they're zooming around super fast, but sometimes with Seregios it feels like he'll take off in one direction and then suddenly hit you in the next direction, and there's little you can do about it unless perform a random dolphin dive and hope for the best, or stick your shield up if you've got a shielded weapon and hope you're blocking in the sort of like kind of the right direction that he may be coming in. I know that it may be just a thing with me, that he may be higher in some people's lists, but that aspect I find really grates on me, and whilst it won't always cut you, it lowers and it really makes the fight unenjoyable for me, which is why I'm rating it so low. If it didn't have that one aspect, he'd probably be a lot higher, because there are other aspects about Seregios. His hit zones are generally quite nice, especially when his quills are up and such. But for me, that kind of light speed zoom attack really irks me. So sorry, Seregios fans. I do admire the monster in terms of design and aesthetics, but in terms of enjoyable and how enjoyable in terms of enjoyability and how fun it is to fight him, he's very low. Okay, Lunagoron. Lunagoron is, for me, high to mid A tier. Definitely a cool concept. I love the aesthetics of this monster, but this isn't about aesthetics. This is about fighting the monster. When I assumed when we first saw video and images of Lunagoron that it would be similar to Odogaron that we experienced in Iceborne and World, or Ebony Odogaron. But no, it's almost like it's got two forms, akin to a werewolf, which is what it's designed after. But I did think it would share some similar mechanics, sort of like almost Velkhana, where when it was in its werewolf form it would have more ice, because obviously it is an ice monster. But that's not the case. It still has very few favourable hit zones, shall we say. But it's not too bad. His moves are generally quite... they have quite a bit of a wind-up behind them. They're telegraphed quite well. Normally easy to avoid or dance around. So, when it performs your attack, you can simply dodge and then follow it with your attacks or combos, rather than you having to take a breather and then reassess. So that's why it's in the sort of like the higher A tier for me personally, despite some of its hit zones not being that favourable with some weapons. Anyway, let's move on to the next one, Acnesom. Acnesom is fine. Acnesom for me is probably around the mid B tier. It's like I said, it's fine. I don't actually have a lot to say about the monster. It's a cool concept in design. Its moves are fairly okay. I know it does have a few moves when it's performing this sort of like feint kick. Sorry, it sort of like feints one way and kicks the other, and that can be a little bit frustrating to deal with. But it has decent hit zones. It's not too tough. Your attacks on it normally feel fairly impactful. So yeah, but overall though, with the feint kick, and a few other aspects, it just doesn't elevate him above, to a more enjoyable height than he is, unfortunately. So he'll remain there. Right, next up is Pyrarachnodaki. Pyrarachnokodaki I enjoy more than normal Arachnokodaki, but I still would say he's in the A tier for me. Pyrarachnokodaki, the main difference between Pyrarachnokodaki and normal Arachnokodaki, for me, that makes him more enjoyable, is that his hit zones are a lot easier. The damage values you can get on his certain body parts are so much more satisfying when compared to its normal cousin. That it makes like I said, it makes the hunt more enjoyable. Sticking him in the A tier. Yeah, he does have the new blast element you have to deal with, but for the most part, he also has a new charge move as well. That's a little bit. If you get caught off guard, you will get hit by it, but you can normally see him raising its abdomen to kind of, his butt to kind of charge it in your direction. So no, his moves are fairly telegraphable. So I don't have really many issues with Pyrarachnokodaki. Like I said, the biggest thing of addressing or having more favourable hit zones when compared to the normal version elevates the monster for me. Anyway, right, okay, next up, Gormagala. Gormagala is S+ tier for me. This may be down to bias a little bit, because it is one of my favourite monsters in the franchise. But I really do enjoy fighting Gormagala, even the afflicted version of the monster as well. Again, it has a power-up mechanic that you would see in some of the other monsters we've talked about. Obviously, it has the unique factor with the Frenzy virus, which is also another great aspect, where, once you're afflicted by the Frenzy virus, it forces you to either use null berries or to become really aggressive and fight off that Frenzy virus and get the buff. Or, if you don't fight it off in time, you will take more damage. Love that. Love that. Apart from that, I think part of the reason he's so high may be the design. I am very fond of how Gormagala looks. So I don't have a lot of bad things to say about the monster. I really don't. Its moves are, once you've experienced them a few times, you can tell what's coming, and they normally have a fair bit of wind-up, so it allows you to react, whether that's to get out of the way, retreat, avoid them, or to try to counter them with one of your own attacks. So ultimately, for me, if Gormagala is on the hunting list, I normally smile to see it when I see it, making him S+ tier for me. Okay, next, Apex Rathian. Now, obviously, when it comes to the Apexes, we have to remember in Sunbreak, they don't really feature that much in Sunbreak quests. Yeah, they may show up as additional monsters in some of the afflicted investigations, but for the most part, you have to remember that the Apex monsters were at their peak, at their apex, get it? Back in the base version of Rise. But regardless, for me, Apex Rathian is probably the only Apex monster that I really enjoyed going up against. Apex Rathian was a more challenging version of Rathian, and I've already gushed about how much I enjoy fighting Rathian, so this was a more challenging, more satisfying version of the monster to fight. Its moves didn't feel unfair or unavoidable, so you could dance around them if you wanted to, and ultimately it was a really fun fight for me. I really did enjoy going up against Apex Rathian towards the end of Monster Hunter Rise, the base version, before Sunbreak came out. So, out of the Apexes, that is probably a rarity to have Apex so high. But it is what it is. Now, speaking of Apexes, again, we're going to Apex Mitsune, which, again, much like the other Apexes, it had all the same issues in that it was a bullet sponge, it had bloated damage numbers in terms of how much it was able to deal to you, how much damage it was able to deal to a hunter, especially these emergency versions, which I failed to talk about with the other Apex monsters. The Apex emergency quests were, they were pretty much, most Apexes would one-shot you. and as a result, yeah, it was normal Mitsune, but with all the Apex powered up stuff, and it wasn't that fun. It was fine. I did enjoy Apex Mitsune a bit more than Diablos, Rathalos, and Zenoga, and especially Azuros, but it wasn't something I looked forward to, if you get what I mean. But so anyway, B tier it goes. So Teostra, smack up into the S tier, just above Kushala, to be honest. Teostra is fine. Feels like part of the scenery now. We always expect Teostra in a Monster Hunter game, and he's fine to fight, in my opinion. He's for me, he's on par to what he was in World and Iceborne in terms of difficulty. His moves are shared. Yeah, I don't have a lot I don't have much that is negative to say about him. Yeah, the blast side effects can be a little bit annoying, but most of his moves are easily telegraphed, so you can work around them. His hit zones are fine. Even when he's powered up, he doesn't seem too difficult. When I say difficult, he doesn't provide. Right, disclaimer with all these monsters. When I say they're not too difficult, what I mean is they don't, give you a unfair challenge, if you get what I mean. They still provide a challenge, but it doesn't feel unfair. Which sometimes, going back to the Apexes, for example, the challenge they provide feels unfair at times. Anyway, with Teo, he doesn't feel unfair. He still provides a little bit of a challenge. His moves are telegraphed quite well, so you can avoid them or counter them as best as you can with your weapon. And overall, for me, he's in the S tier. Okay, Lucent Nagakuga. Lucent Nagakuga is a little bit of a oddity. I wish we could experience Lucent Nagakuga in more than the Forlorn Arena. I really do, but I don't know if that will ever be the case. When compared to the normal version, it shares very many similarities to the normal Nagakuga, which is probably why I'm sticking it here in S tier. It is a little bit more challenging than Nagakuga, which maybe elevates it for me, because it does specialize in its poison, and it has its sort of ultimate attacks now, as well as using the stealth aspect as well, which is nice. I think it looks beautiful looking monster, and overall a lot of what I said about Nagakuga does also apply to Lucent Nagakuga. So yeah, for me, Lucent Nagakuga was a nice addition. S tier for me. Right, Ibushi, I much prefer to fight Ibushi over Nawa, to the point where I think I put Ibushi in the mid B tier, to be honest. Ibushi, his moves and attacks feel a lot fairer when compared to Nawa. I feel that it doesn't have... Well, it is supposed to be a lower tier monster than Nawa, I believe. So it doesn't hit as hard. I don't know, it's weird. Ibushi does not feel nearly as frustrating to fight for me, ultimately, at the end of the day. And that's why I'm elevating as high as it is. Its hit zones and weaknesses are also quite satisfying. And it has I think it has more counters when in the arenas you fight it in. With the when you're fighting Nawa, you don't have access to the Dragonators and the other siege weapons that you do when you're fighting Ibushi. So that could be a key reason that when fighting Ibushi, not only on top of its moves being easier to deal with, you also have more options in the arena to counter it and take it down. So B tier for Ibushi for me. Great Baggy is another punching bag. Great Baggy is another punching bag. Oh, sorry, my bad. Great Rogi. Great Baggy's the other one. These two are pretty much the same. One's sleep, one's poison. They're great monsters to test out your builds on. But if you want a challenge, you're not going to get it from these. So, okay, going up against this one, remember to bring your antidotes or herbal medicines. But, low A. Right, next up is Valstrax. Crimson Glow Valstrax. Odd monster. A lot of people don't seem to be that satisfied with him when compared to the Generation's Ultimate Valstrax. They feel it's slower. But I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I mean, when a monster is too fast or doesn't leave you windows of opportunity to actually attack it, it can be frustrating to fight. Ultimately, though, for me, Valstrax is... Oh, I don't know. I'm struggling to place this one, if I'm honest. I'm looking around here, the sort of like mid A's, the mid A tier, in terms of how enjoyable it was to fight. I got quite frustrated at times when fighting him. Yeah, I think I put him there. Because when I first went up against him, I was using the bow, and the hit zones weren't exactly the best, and it did sour the experience a little bit. Obviously, taking him on with other weapons, I didn't have that issue, and eventually we did learn his moves and abilities. His ambush is amazing. I know it's a gimmick, but it is quite a fun gimmick. I think mid A tier for Valstrax. It's hard. I'm struggling to sort of like express, because the challenge of Crimson Glow Valstrax is still there, but at the same time, it doesn't feel as his moves and attacks don't feel as fun or enjoyable, if that makes sense. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I'm struggling to place him, if I'm honest. I think that's probably one of the hardest ones, I would say. I don't think he's the worst, but by no means the best. But for me, mid A's. Right, Diablos. Diablos for me is in the A tier, I believe. Now, let's put Diablos up here. Diablos is fine in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Its new additional Master Rank moves are fine. I believe he doesn't charge about as much as he does in previous games. He still does it a fair bit, of course, but it doesn't feel nearly as much, which means that it gives you more opportunities to perform your own attacks rather than chasing them down. Obviously, when he does start going zoomies, and he is an anomaly version, it can be hard to target those anomaly cores to power him down, but it's not the biggest of problems the monster has. I think that is probably the extent of the most difficult thing about the monster. Apart from that, it uses a lot more telegraphed moves. There are certain tricks you can do with Diablos. For example, there's this slam where he sort of like headbutts the ground almost, and it goes to where your location is. So the way to avoid it is to dodge under his legs. I kind of find that so satisfying to do. And there are little tricks like that I like about the Diablos hunt, which is why, for me, it's in the higher sort of like A tier for me. But if you fought Diablos in any of the previous games, you'll pretty much know what to expect with this one. Like I said, the head slam and maybe the tail rock projectile thing are the only sort of like new tricks up its sleeve that could potentially catch you unaware. But once you've experienced them a few times, you know what to expect. And there are little tricks you can do to avoid them and continue your assault on the monster. Alright, Shigaru Magala. Shigaru Magala for me is an S tier monster. Much like Gore Magala, it is a more challenging version. It hits harder, it's more aggressive, but I do enjoy the challenge of Shigaru. to the point. So that's why I'm putting him in S+. There are ways around its attacks which leave it open to your own attacks. It has a powered up state which you can power down by attacking certain points. Obviously, there's the frenzy virus mechanic as well that you have to take into account. Actually, saying that as well, with the I suppose with Shigaru and Gore Magala, you also have to worry about the frenzy virus, which is a new mechanic, and with Malzeno, you have the blood blight you have to worry about. Although you can say the blood blight you have to worry about on all afflicted monsters, so that's kind of a moot point. But regardless, these three monsters all add a sort of like mechanic to their fight that you wouldn't normally have in normal hunts, which I don't know, I guess seems to be something that I enjoy because I've rated these monsters all so high. Then again, you know, again with Shigaru, much like Gore, it could be a little bit of bias here to why I'm rating him so high. But regardless, most of its moves are telegraphed. They have a decent wind up that you can react to them as long as you're patient and don't overcommit with your moves. I know that can be tough against certain monsters like the anomaly monsters, but there isn't an anomaly Shigaru Magala. We'll see when the Chaotic Gore Magala comes out if that sort of strategy works, but we'll see. Alright, Kushala? Kuluyaku. Kuluyaku is another good boy. But unfortunately, another little bit of a punching bag and test dummy. I feel it's a little bit more threatening than the Great Rogi and Baggy, but it's still nonetheless an easy monster to take on, quite easy to counter. When it brings out its rock or egg or pot, it has a little bit of an added kind of an added threat to the hunt, but that, you know, you can crowd control it to make it drop it. So it's not the toughest of hunts by any means. It has a very limited move set, but I still find the hunt quite enjoyable. And once again, it is another monster to take on if you are looking to test builds or test weapons, in my opinion. So for me, low A's. Risen Chameleos. Risen Chameleos is only a little bit slightly a bit better than the normal Chameleos, in all honesty. To be honest, they share very similar move pools. The only difference is it has the Risen sort of like explosion mechanic, that sort of power up kind of mechanic, which is fine. It adds a little bit of extra depth to, and challenge to the hunt, but it doesn't elevate it enough beyond what the normal Chameleos fight is. Obviously as well, it also has a little bit more of a bloated health pool, as well as increased damage numbers, which could be a little bit of a turn off for some players out there. But I think the base Chameleos moveset isn't to the point where it's frustrating that these increases to its health and damage output are going to ruin the hunt. So for me, it's sort of like mid A tier for Risen Chameleos. Tobi-Kadachi. I actually really enjoy fighting Tobi-Kadachi. I know this may be odd, but for me, Tobi-Kadachi, I've got a soft spot for the monster. I think it looks beautiful. It would be a much higher. It would probably be an S+ tier in terms of looks for me. I think it's very pretty and gorgeous. Its moves, I know for some players, its moves can catch people unaware, but they do have quite a bit of a wind up. It has a slight power up mechanic where it will eventually become go Super Saiyan, similar to Sonoga and Rajan, but it can be powered down quite easily. I think one of the reasons I do enjoy fighting Tobi-Kadachi is because it has very generous hit zones, and these hit zones are quite big as well. So, you know, it does teach you to it kind of prepares you for these powered up monsters, as in, you know, you can aim at these points on Tobi-Kadachi where they're starting to get that static electricity, its fur is starting to stand up, that you can aim at them and power it down that way. So for me, I just find it a fun fight. I don't think it's the most challenging fight out there, but I do find it fun nonetheless. It's a nice dance, making him in the mid S tier for me. Right, Kezu, the Mephalic monster of the roster. Now, Kezu I've got a little bit of a love-hate relationship with. Kezu is one of the rare monsters that drops Pale Extract, which is used for the Mega Demon drugs and Mega Armor Skin drugs, which I use all the time. So I have to farm the monster a fair bit if I want a little bit of extra Pale Extract, of course. So I had to learn how to do the damn monster. That I disliked fighting this monster so much in Generations. But I've grown to like it a little bit more in Rise and Sunbreak. So, for me, Kezu is around mid B tier, I would say. I don't know why it took me so long to learn its moveset, because it does, looking back at it, its moveset is actually quite limited. It doesn't have a lot of moves in its arsenal. I think it's I would often get hit and misjudge a lot of its attack stats result in paralysis and end up getting hit or caught in that way. But once you realise that you can't commit to overly long combos or attack strings, then you are normally all right. You can normally judge. I mean, it's not the worst. It's not like some monsters where you get next to no windows of opportunity to attack. You do have a decent amount of time to attack, but it's not. You can't, just because it's a low tier monster. Although that being said, I could say that about these fanged beasts, but I don't know. It's not the same. Anyway, rambling aside, he's mid B. Once you learn his moves, prioritize avoiding those electric attacks and getting paralyzed. You can be a bit more risky and try to dodge around his sort of more physical attacks and continue with your own attacks. Don't do that with the attacks that can potentially paralyze you. Then you'll have a better time fighting Kezu. Anyway, Somnicanth. Somnicanth is low B. Low B. I mean, it's fine. It shares it's very similar to Aurora Somnicanth. The main difference being that it utilizes the sleep element, and there are certain attacks it does that kind of just infuriate me. I know you can get around the sleep mechanic by using energy drinks and such, or having your Palicos or Palamutes wake you up, but it's still a annoying factor of the fight that puts a dampener on me. Plus, I dislike the Somnicanth Wyvern riding super attack. That it just puts the monster on a low B tier for me. Now, Mitsusune would probably be S tier in terms of looks, but unfortunately the monster is a little bit lower when it comes to the actual experience fighting it. I don't think it's as bad as Violet Mitsusune, but it still has that little bit of an aspect of certain weapons. It feels like I'm just chasing the monster rather than having a dance and a fight with it. Chase me kind of attitude the monster has. But the thing is, normal Mitsusune has a lot better and generous hit zones when compared to the Violet Mitsusune, making it a lot more fun to fight in that department, which elevates it all the way up to S tier, because there are certain aspects of Mitsusune that I like in terms of challenge. That does put the monster higher up on the list for me personally. So, next up, Arachnakadaki. Arachnakadaki I don't enjoy as much as Pyrarachnakadaki. Arachnakadaki has annoying hit zones, but actually let's put him. I'm going to put him actually up here, because I should have mentioned this about Pyrarachnakadaki as well. I do like the aspect of it having different stages where you take the webs off of its legs first, so it puts the webs on its butt. Then you take the web off its butt, and then it powers down again, and it kind of, the cycle rinses and repeats. I do like that. I like how that works. But Arachnakadaki, the main difference is the hit zones. It also has a few moves that I find a little bit more annoying to deal with when compared to Pyrarachnakadaki. Namely, it's when its fire attacks when it spurts fire and moves at the same time. Those can be a little bit tricky to deal with because they are hard to necessarily counter. Because if you counter maybe the first, it's like the flamethrower attacks and fire attacks. They tick multiple times, so you counter the first one, but you get hit by the follow up ticks. So it lowers the Raknakodaki hunts in terms of how enjoyable they are for me, a little bit, unfortunately. Now, speaking of which, Basil Geese, or Juice, or however you like to pronounce it. In the title update presentations, they said Basil Geese. So, we'll go with that for now. But, Basil Geese. I'm plopping him there. Basil Geese is a little bit, I want to say, dull. I don't find him nearly as enjoyable to hunt in Sunbreak and Rise when compared to World and Iceborne. I don't think he had quite that threatening nature that he once had. And for gunners, his hit zones aren't exactly the best. A lot of the time when it comes to fighting the monster as well, the blast scales can be... I mean, they can be avoided, but they are tricky to deal with if you're using weapons that specializes in counter attacks. You know, counter peak performance for the charge blade or the counters on the longsword. Because most of the time, you counter the attack the monster does, only to be hit by the blast scale straight away afterwards. So it feels very unsatisfying in that sense. It feels like you've been robbed of your counter attack. I know there are ways around it. For example, with the counter peak performance for the charge blade, as I just mentioned, you'll block the first attack, then perform the counter peak performance on the blast scale. So there are ways around it, of course, but for the most part, I don't enjoy the Basil Geese fight for those reasons. Which, to be honest, while we're on it, I'll bring up Steven Basil Juice. I'm so used to calling him Basil Juice. Basil Geese is more enjoyable to fight than the normal one because it has more favourable hit zones despite the monster being more aggressive, not only in terms of how it moves, but also how it distributes its blast scales. But that alone elevates it for me, making it a more enjoyable fight than the normal version. Now, Furious Rajang. Furious Rajang is probably high A tier for me. He definitely has much more of a challenge than the normal Rajang. But again, it doesn't feel to the point where he was in previous games. He doesn't feel as threatening whatsoever. He feels like, it's almost like he's, without that kind of threatening nature that he had in his movements and arsenals, and his having very little window of opportunity between his attacks, losing that, it's almost like he's lost a little bit of character for me, which is sad to say because I still think he's a great monster. And Furious Rajang has one of the best wyvern riding attacks in the game, I think. But he is still a challenge, and I still enjoy fighting him. I do like that when he performs certain AoE attacks, his area of effect attacks on the ground, that there are specific spots that you can try to position your hunter in to avoid the attacks and allow you an opportunity to perform some of your harder hitting moves or longer combos. So I do appreciate there's that element to the hunt, making it a high A tier hunt for me. So Andy Nath, for me, I do enjoy. He's a guilty pleasure hunt. In a way, he's a little bit like Tobikadashi. He does have that power-up state where he'll, his flame sack in his neck becomes lit up. And in a way, it feels like you're powering him down by punching him in the throat, which bless him. But I know he can be a little bit frustrating for short weapons like Sword and Shield and Dual Blades, because it's hard to hit those nice, juicy hit zones. But I don't know what it is about Anjanath. He just feels like he is a simple monster. I will give him that. But the hunt against him, I always enjoy the hunts against him. And like I said, it's like he's got a very weak power-up state when compared to some of these other monsters. But it's almost like paving the way for these monsters who have the more powered up forms, like Tobi Kadachi in a way. But so for me, he's an S tier. I love the guy. Right. Okay. Next up is Great Izuchi. Again, a Great Izuchi is much like the other small bird wyverns. It's a punching bag. Test your build, test your skill, test your combos, so on and so forth. I do find Great Izuchi a little bit more tolerable than Great Baggy and Great Rogi, but that's because it's elementless. It doesn't utilize any poison or sleep elements. It's just a straightforward hunt. Nothing more to say than that. Like I said, maybe could be considered a little bit boring, but like I said, it's like I said about the other ones. I mean, it's a good testing point. So for me, low A. Bishiten, for me, I don't really like fighting. It's much the same as Blood Orange Bishiten. Actually, I think I prefer the normal. I prefer to fight the normal ones to the Blood Orange one, because the normal one doesn't have the annoying blast knockback aspects that the Blood Orange does. Blood Orange obviously will use the explosive pine cones, whilst normal one will just use fruit, which can still knock you about and poison you, or potentially paralyze you. But its moves are a little bit more, they have a slower wind up, they're easier to deal with, and they don't have kind of follow-up effects. Like with Blood Orange, you'll throw a pine cone, you'll get hit by the pine cone, and then if you avoid that, you may get hit by the explosion of the pine cone. That doesn't really happen with Bishiten. So whilst Blood Orange does provide a little bit more of a challenge, the challenge is a little bit more frustrating for me than the normal one. Regardless, most of the issues I said about Blood Orange Bishiten, in how the monster moves, how it feels like your attacks aren't really doing much to it, it's why it's in the sort of like high C area for me, unfortunately, for old Bishiten. Right, Flaming Espinas. Flaming Espinas is more enjoyable than the normal one. Flaming Espinas is pretty much all the same elements kind of applied to the normal Espinas, but I believe because we're fighting Flaming Espinas in that Forlorn Arena, it feels a little bit more counterable, shall we say. Most of the time when we're fighting normal Espinas, we end up fighting it in a very more enclosed space, which means we get hit more by the fireballs or its charging attacks. In the Forlorn Arena with Flaming Espinas, it feels more open and thus you can avoid it more. But in some respects, that could also be a detriment to the hunt, because it means that we're only experiencing the monster in one place. I believe that will change with the next title update when we get the Afflicted version, but I feel being able to go toe-to-toe with the monster, and I do like its nuclear bomb mechanic as well. It also has decent hit zones, especially when the monster becomes powered up, so you got that nice trade-off. When it starts using its flame attacks, its head becomes weaker and more susceptible to damage, whereas it becomes harder when it's not powered up, and your hits don't do as much damage to the head when that's the case. So yeah, mid to high ace for me for Flaming Espinas. Right, Royal Ludroth. Royal Ludroth is an odd one. I'm going to put him there. Royal Ludroth is fine, especially the normal version of the monster. The Afflicted monster, though, has some elements that some of the other Afflicted monsters have, like Tetranodon, like I said all the way at the start of this, where when it starts charging around over and over and over again, you don't have time to attack the anomaly cores. It can just bowl you over. It becomes a little bit of a frustrating aspect. I mean, in that case, it's about positioning and trying to stop him from performing those charge attacks in the first place. But overall, it's not the worst, but by no means the most enjoyable, if I'm honest. So for me, Royal Ludroth goes in the high B tiers. Right, Barioth. Barioth is... Barioth. I'm going to put him very high A. It's almost S tier. Barioth has No, let's put him. Actually, yeah, let's put him S tier. Barioth has some aspects to Tigrex in terms of his body layout, like a better way of describing it. In that, you aim for the arms, it eventually falls over. It becomes hard to run, much like Tigrex. You can smack it in the face and break its teeth, and its attacks from its teeth aren't as bad. The only thing that makes it less fun than Tigrex for me is the hit zones on its wings aren't as favourable. The ice attacks aren't always the most enjoyable to deal with. It does have unique tail attacks. I will give it that. That did catch me unaware the first time I started experiencing them. Its tail attacks can be quite a challenge in some respects. And I think that was the biggest learning curve I had with Barioth. But once you get it down, once you understand it's coming, which, to be honest, like I said, it took a little while to read when this tail attack was coming, it can be quite satisfying dodging it or countering it. But for me, Barioth is still a challenging hunt, and it is enjoyable when you're on the ball, if that makes sense. When you're, Barioth wouldn't be a fight I would want to go up if I was feeling a little bit sleepy or something like that, especially the afflicted version. So for me, he's still good, still a challenge, and he goes in the low S tier for me. Right, I'm gonna go Gyarados first because I'll do Gold Raffian last because I want to end on a higher tier monster. Anyway, Gyarados for me is in the D tier. Now the main reason of this is, like I said with Almudron, when I say with Gyarados being in D tier, this refers to mainly the anomaly afflicted Gyarados. Normal Gyarados would probably be around here. Afflicted one though, it's going smack bang here. This is because it has so many anomaly cores that cannot be accessed when it submerges itself, and it will stay submerged for a fair bit, which means that you have to deal with the annoying ass Nova attacks quite a bit with when you're taking on Gyarados, when it's an afflicted Gyarados. That alone really does put a dampener on the hunt, even if it is just a small aspect of one version of the monster. But that in itself sticks it down here in the D tier. It's strange how some of the D tier monsters, they have one or two aspects that renegade them for me and make the hunt not enjoyable at all. But anyway, let's move on to the last monster, Gold Raffian. Gold Raffian for me, up in the S plus tier. I really do enjoy. Actually, there we go. Should move that like that. Gold Raffian is, for me, a lot of fun. I really do enjoy the monster. It has all the same aspects as Silver Rathalos, but it doesn't stay airborne for nearly as long. It also has favourable hit zones in that you can attack its legs that are quite susceptible to damage from pretty much any type. And I love how the power mechanic works for Gold Raffian, in some respects as well as Silver Rathalos, where their heads are quite hard until they get powered up, and then they become extremely soft, and then you can break the head and it becomes soft all the time. I love how that works. But Gold Raffian has all the aspects of the other Raffians I've mentioned. It just feels like a beautiful dance. I can't describe it in any better way. And for me, it's one of the most enjoyable hunts in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. So there we have it. That is my tier list. Remember that this is my personal tier list of how enjoyable a monster is to fight, not necessarily how the monster looks, its moveset, how difficult it is. It's just how I personally feel when going up against them. So yours is probably going to be completely different, I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. If you agree with this, if there's any you severely disagree with, or what your own personal favourite hunts are. So leave a comment down below. And until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you my tier list to my favourite hunts in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like for more.